The story of an Emmett football coach, Rich Hargett, is a great place to start when looking at David and Goliath, Underdogs, Misfits, and the Art of Battling Giants. Malcolm Gladwell may have thought Hargett an unlikely candidate at first, as a successful public speaker, an avid coach, and teacher. Little did he know that his popularity at Emmett High School would only ascend into inspiration as well through his own David and Goliath struggle. In January, he received news that an odd birthmark was in fact advanced tongue cancer and would lead to removal of over 20% of his tongue. Mute at first, he would speak again, but with substantial difficulty. News then came that the cancer had taken nearly 20 of his lymph nodes. Surgery opening his throat to ear became necessary, but his positivity never waned. He would relearn speech, eating, and how to swallow, but he would only miss 6 days away from school. Hargett's fight against one of the most terrifying modern Goliaths fits right into the overall idea of Gladwell's book. Holding faith, never giving up, and using hardship to better yourself and others. In the classical biblical story of David and Goliath, there are a few themes that go past the common, the little guy hit the big guy with a rock and won by using ingenuity and his strengths to his advantage. David's 11 brothers were all sent to the battle lines, while he was kept at home. It wasn't until he was sent as a simple messenger to see how the battle was going that he became involved at all, and all by his own choice. While the army was terrified of a 9-foot giant ahead of him, David would not stand for his God to be mocked. He refused armor and weapons, going in with a simple slingshot, garnering ridicule. It was his solidarity and awareness of his strengths, lightness of foot without the heavy armor, and familiarity with his weapon rather than a foreign tool that gave him the upper hand. There are many common themes in Gladwell's book, but it always returns to two very important lessons. Firstly, he speaks of the beauty and inspiration that can be found when an underdog wins, or one who confidently refuses failure can create just as much inspiration. The second lesson Gladwell invokes is the idea of classifications about the victim versus oppressor perspective in each individual mindset. Who is David and who is Goliath? Why? Gladwell states that it comes down to the individual Goliath's ability to recognize their influence and use it for good. Utilizing what may have been oppressive before can create opportunity to utilize all strengths and talents efficiently. Gladwell emphasizes there are always examples of good giants and bad giants. Today, they must be defined as more than just a single adversary in a slingshot battle. Modern-day Goliaths could be bosses at work, personal relationships, health, or even the very social system we have developed to maintain our own order. How we handle them defines our world. With so many complexities surrounding existing in our world today, the threat of a Goliath can come from any direction. Gladwell starts his work with the statement, Part 1, the advantages of disadvantages and the disadvantages of advantages. While this flies in the face of conventional wisdom, the author says otherwise. From two very different periods of time and subject, Gladwell tells of 19th century painters in France and of a girls' basketball team led by a man from Mumbai who'd never seen the sport before. Rules and expectations create invisible boxes and barriers holding us in, a unanimous disregard that creates innovation. In one example, Impressionists in France were laughed out of galleries as their work didn't fit any of the expectations that the acceptable works did. If you wanted recognition, works of art were to be presented in classical Rubens form, utilizing high and low light, classic subject matter such as history or mythology, and a heightened attention to realism and accuracy. Who would later come to be known as the early Impressionists, artists who allowed the focus to flow through the emotive ability of color and motion rather than classic mythology to speak, was brand new. Using color as their narrative rather than concrete reference certainly set aside artists like Renoir, Basile, and Monet. While their works hang in museums with priceless value today, suicide after public ridicule and rejection in art was not uncommon at the time. Often, even if they did get into a gallery, their work was stuffed in the back where paintings considered to be failures were located. Sadly, many of these artists were not appreciated in their time, but their persistence and vision made many movements and visionaries such as Rothko and Pollock. Rothko allowed color contrast and geometrics to create emotion, while Pollock stated that his art was created between the time the paint left the brush to when it would land on the canvas he'd spread across the floor. The idea of removing the artist's direct touch and allowing art to take place through gravity and motion reinvented how art was perceived and created yet again. How can this have any similarity to Vivek, the basketball coach from Mumbai who'd never seen a game? Vivek's experiences with cricket and soccer gave him a very different strategy when learning the game and teaching his team different techniques, much like the Impressionists. He may not have been thrown out for his unconventional approach, but standard drills and basketball positions were not even a consideration. They literally did not exist in his mind frame. While this seems like a disadvantage, both the enthusiasm he showed in discovering and creating new strategies and the positive feedback he received from his team led them to victory and acknowledgement of how attitude and creativity can be the victor, even against traditional practices. The main theme that continued to jump off the page was that every experience, conversation, game, or painting is a cumulative collection of a single, unique human being's experiences. That experience, inspiration, or conversation can never unfold in a different way or its outcome change. What can change is how that outcome is perceived and if it's seen as a gift or a hardship. The only true manner of influence we have over the chaos of life in many experiences is this choice. As Gladwell's second focus in reflection, the idea that we all have the potential to be either Davids or Goliaths changes the discussion. Often, someone either had power established for them or are in a leadership position due to previous experience. Opportunity exists for everyone to be perceived as the oppressed or the oppressor, something often guided by the simplicity of attitude. If a giant is classified as a person or organization with established clout and the ability to enhance or damage its strength, it's also important to acknowledge both ends of the spectrum. A giant who thrives on fear enhances their end goal by a continuation of cruelty. Leniency or understanding may harm their hold on power, as they may appear weak. However, a Goliath who acknowledges their power to influence a situation in a positive way may have more work to do initially, but are more likely to have support from those around them. Gladwell provides us with a great example of a bad Goliath and how an outsider's controlling efforts can create more harm than good. In 1969, the Catholic and Protestant faiths were battling across Ireland with bombings, riots, and burnings of homes. By mid-1970, the British Army had stepped in to act as peacekeepers between them. The issue with their insertion, however, was that they approached the issue as a superior force over both, with superior firepower. A lack of sympathy and mysticism was their motto, embodying a third unbiased party. However, their insertion in an external dispute with a lack of understanding in the history and culture. Their presence only caused more bloodshed and confusion. Their presence also helped extend the conflict 30 years. Engaging the opposite theory to a lack of sympathy and mysticism would have likely bridged gaps and saved lives, as sympathy, forgiveness, and mysticism were all pivotal aspects of the issue. Good Goliaths exist among us as well. At times, even if the military or police are doing their community's 95% dedicated service, a bad 5% can take hold. The project of Brownsville, New York was such a place, where law enforcement went from the appearance of a short-sighted giant to the embrace of a community. In 2003, Joanne Jaffe took over the housing and focus on juvenile crime. Starting with the kids and families to offer assistance only caused slammed doors at the sight of her badge. Even though Jaffe was trying to improve the community, the lack of engagement was stopping her cold. An overheard conversation from a troubled child about how the impoverished community had bound together to get a family a turkey for Thanksgiving gave her a new perspective. She realized that the giant persona that the police force in New York had took on was that of extreme negativity. She went to the head of the police and proposed her community outreach idea, providing Thanksgiving for those most in need. She would say to the families, I know sometimes you can hate the police. I understand all that. But I just want you to know, as much as it seems that we're harassing you by knocking on your door, we really do care, and we really do want you to have a happy Thanksgiving. It may have been a plea for legitimacy, but her plea did not fall on deaf ears. Soon, kids she had been working with were excited to see her. Negative connotations began to shift as police came out to play basketball with them, showing the next generation that a badge isn't bad. She shifted a police team into social workers with the backup of police training. Her motion changed police there. Rates of graduation, prison rates after graduation, and even opinions of the older residents. The police in a troubled area of New York must have already had a full caseload, and adding to the cost and manpower of delivering turkeys for Thanksgiving shouldn't have changed so much, but it did. The Goliath that was once a threat was now an asset who had shown their dedication to the community's success. Adversary was now a counterproductive practice for everybody, rather than an act of bravery or independence. In conclusion, we've all been Davids and we've all been Goliaths. The only difference between the two is the state of mind you choose. Regardless of the challenge, ingenuity and confidence in forging a new path is the key to this book. Following paths already trodden may be safe, but it also denies the traveler undiscovered experiences. The Wall Street Journal reviewed the book as entertaining, but lacking in solid foundations in evidence and logic. And the New Republic followed up with a statement that the book is less insightful than a Chinese fortune cookie. A challenge set to us to use the book itself to test its own critics. While the statements may be harsh, acknowledging the validity of the reviewing giant's perspectives offer the writer as well as the reader a more rounded perspective into the point. If evidence, logic, and insight are in question, then how could the author have created a stronger case? Would modifying the book to accommodate those needs make it a research work and less of a compelling read for a wider variety of audiences? Isn't the point of a Chinese fortune cookie to take a deeper and more retrospective look into our present, past, and future, and apply a generally helpful external thought into processing potential solutions? As Emmett High School sophomore nose guard Miguel Laura said, "Even when you get down, you've got to get back up. That's a good lesson. You can't quit." Miguel has likely never heard of Malcolm Gladwell or the stories he tells, but he has seen it in action through his coach, Rich Hargett. This has been Carissa Meyer reviewing David and Goliath, Underdogs, Misfits, and the Art of Battling Giants.